spinach, beets, chard, epazote, quinoa. Welcome to episode 49 of the Growing Space podcast. In this week's episode, we are continuing on with our Meet the Plant Families mini-series. This is the third of 4 fall plant families that we are covering. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 47 and 48, I would encourage you to give those a listen once you wrap up with this one, or, whenever you have time and you want to continue your learning of common edible fall crops that you can plant very, very soon, then I would suggest that you give those a listen. And in episode 47, I introduced the Lamiaceae plant family, which is the mint family, which a lot of our edible culinary herbs belong to. And then last week's episode was all about the Alliums, which is a subset of the Amaryllis plant family, or the Amaryllidaceae plant family. But in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about those edible members that I just mentioned at the very tippy top of this episode. They belong to the Chenopodiaceae plant family. And this plant family is actually a subfamily in the Amaryllidaceae plant family, so the amaranth plant family. We're kind of following suit on these Meet the Plant Family episodes. I will walk you through the different characteristics of this plant family, how to grow them, what all they need, how to know when they're ready to harvest, feeding them, soil measures or soil concerns, ideas for promoting healthy soil, why they are great companion plants, and pest concerns. Maybe some other fun little facts and tidbits sprinkled in as well. Let's go ahead, tuck in, and get ready to learn about how to grow spinach, beets, and Swiss chard successfully at home.
Welcome to the Growing Space podcast. I'm your host, Farmer Erin, owner of the Patio Farmer, and I believe that no matter what size space you have, you can grow food at home. Tune in every Tuesday as I share my best tips, tricks, and encouragement for tending to homegrown edible plants. I'm here to support your food growing journey. The Growing Space podcast is sponsored by Plant Club by the Patio Farmer. Plant Club by the Patio Farmer is a monthly subscription service I started in 2020. It's a membership-based opportunity to take your growing journey to the next level. With 4 different membership options, you get to decide the amount and kind of support that's right for you. All Plant Club members receive access to my online community through a platform called Circle. Having access to this platform allows members to share pictures, ask questions, celebrate harvest, and get to know each other. All Plant Club members also have access to free seeds each month, along with information on how to plant and tend to their crops, with seeding instructions and downloadable resources from the Patio Farmer's Resource Library. Membership starts at just $14 a month. Join Plant Club today by visiting my website, thepatiofarmer.com/membership.
Okay, y'all. Now, last week, if you listened to last week's episode, I gave a little teaser and I said that I was really excited about this plant family and specifically growing one of the members of this plant family this fall, and that would be spinach. Oh my gosh. I have been obsessed like the last 2 years. I feel like that's safe to say. It could have been longer. But the last 2 years, I have been bound and determined to have a bumper crop of spinach. But as it goes, when we have these ideas, it's kind of like telling God your plans, right? Yeah, you just end up laughing. But you set out with these goals, like the last 2 years, spring and fall. I want to grow tons and tons of spinach. I just want to have tons of spinach to harvest. I'm so excited for some spinach. And it just hasn't panned out for me, which is fine, because when we're growing food, we are at the mercy of so many different variables and concerns that are beyond our control, truly. And so we just kind of have to go with it and embrace the bounty of the seasons, just because spinach has not been great for me the last couple of cool seasons doesn't mean I haven't had great success. Like this past spring, my kale was just bonkers, which if you know anything about me, I love kale. I'm obsessed with kale. Speaking of kale and other cool weather plants that you can be growing in the fall and spring, if you live in a temperate climate like I do, I'm in zone 8A. I'll put a link in the show notes if you need to check your hardiness zone. Also, spoiler, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, if you're brand new to this podcast. But I also did an episode in the spring on the Brassicaceae plant family, which kale belongs to, and so do a ton of other delicious mustardy greens like cabbage and kohlrabi and radishes. And you should give that episode a listen. I'll put a link in the show notes. Don't worry. So anyway, I am just bound and determined to give spinach another shot this fall. And I also love beets. I love eating beets. I think they're so tasty. Chard and I are recovering from a very stressful first encounter that I had with chard. It was while I was farming, and it wasn't our most glorious crop that we had, and we had to spend a lot of time like picking through the chard to find some bunches for market or for the CSA. It was a great filler, but it was just really stressful to have to harvest. I distinctly remember that. So I am still trying to embrace chard, but these plants have exponential benefits for planting in our growing space. So I'm really excited to share more information about these with you today. Some common characteristics of these 3 edible plants. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. I know I mentioned epazote and quinoa at the top of this episode. That's just fun facts for you. I am really going to focus on spinach, beets, and chard in this episode. These 3 types of plants are cool weather plants, and they're biennials, which means they flower in their second year. And this is a really beautiful thing because it gives us a little bit of an extension on when we can be growing these. Now, spinach is a little bit of an exception here. Spinach is super intolerant to the heat. So if you live somewhere where you get super hot, warm summers, spinach is not going to be a great year-round grower for you. There are some varieties that are more heat tolerant, so definitely pay attention when you're shopping for spinach seed to find something that's going to match when and where you are hoping to grow your spinach. There are other varieties that are great for overwintering, that are really, really frost hardy, that can survive snow. So that, if you are planning on overwintering them, like I am this year, fingers crossed, then you might want to shoot for one of those varieties. Now, your beets and your chard are kind of 2 miraculous little biennials. And the reason for that is because they can tolerate light freezes, even like fairly cold snaps, like, mid-20s would be fine for some Swiss chard and beets uncovered. And they are also pretty tolerant to the summer heat. Like you can have beets and chard growing in 100-degree weather in the summer, and they're like unfazed. It's incredible. So beets and chard are great for that reason. Now, another purpose or another part of doing this plant family mini series right now, not only is to prepare you for fall, but it's also to discuss some great companion plants for our spaces. Now, I'm kind of going a little out of order in terms of the information that I'm going to share with you about this particular plant family, but it's just flowing, so I'm going to go with it. So a great benefit, beyond the fact that these plants are biennials for planting beets and chard in your growing space is that there are not many pests that enjoy these for whatever reason. There's just not. You might get a few beetles, maybe here and there on your spinach or on your beets, but it's nothing that's devastating. And there's also like not many diseases that affect these plants either. Now, the Chenopodiaceae plant family is also known as the goosefoot family. So like non-edible members of this plant family are known to be a little stinky. So I don't know if that's, kind of a secret weapon that these edible plants that I don't think are too terribly stinky or, They do have fairly strong flavor profiles, but that's what we love about them. Or maybe we don't love that about them. I know a lot of people who really don't like beets, and that's fair. So maybe it's something in their genetics, being the goose-footed family, that is just a little off-putting to the critters and the insects. I don't know what it is, but I have never had a beet, spinach, or chard crop devastated by a pest. So there. It's great to put all around your plants. Really confuse those bugs. Whatever it is they have going for them is really working. Now, there are some fungal diseases that can affect your beet leaves in particular, and also Swiss chard. I don't usually see this on spinach, but you never know. And again, this is the reason why learning more about plant families and who all is related to each other is super important, because it gives you a leg up, when you're trying to grow different things and try to get some perspective on what you can expect throughout the growing season. So there is a fungal disease called Cercospora that can affect your beet leaves. And this is a fairly common disease that you can see on your beets, and it's a fungal disease. So it's really easy to treat. You just need a garden safe fungicide, a spray bottle, and some fresh water. And you can easily treat this. Neem oil is great. I'll put some recommendations in the show notes for different products that you can use. But Cercospora, it basically creates these like bullseye shaped markings on your leaves, on your beet leaves in particular. Again, it's easily treated, and it's not like it negatively affects the plant except for the appearance of the leaves. So you can still totally eat the leaves, even though they have this little fungal outbreak on them. It's not going to hurt you. Also, plug right there for eating your beet greens. Don't compost them. Don't throw them out. You feed them to the chickens if you want, because little chickens need a snack too, and they love dark leafy greens. But I would encourage you all to give your beet greens a snack. Saute them up. A little bit of butter or oil, whatever floats your boat, some herbs, spices. If you like beets, you'll love the beet greens. Trust me, give it a try. Now, another benefit for growing the members of the Chenopodiaceae plant family is that they are fairly small, compact plants. So beets are obviously a root vegetable, and they only need about 4 to 6 inches to really be happy and grow those big, juicy bulbs for you that we want. Now, as a root vegetable, again, kind of borrowing from the content from last week's episode on the Allium plant family, being that you are cultivating primarily the root of this plant, you want to make sure that you're adding a touch of phosphorus to your soil before you plant. You can purchase rock phosphate or bone meal. Both of those are great. If you have dogs, just a little reminder that maybe you want to go with the rock phosphate and not the bone meal. Just take it from me as a fellow dog mom. It's less mess for you if you get the rock phosphate. But you want to add a little bit of phosphorus to your soil. For all of these crops, your spinach, beets, and chard, you want to use a well-draining soil if possible. You can also amend your soil with compost or all-purpose plant food before you plant or sow. For beets in particular, before we move on to the other ones, beets are best started from seed directly where you are going to be growing them. Beets can be a little finicky to get to germinate, so you have a couple of options. You could sow like twice as many beet seeds as you want plants to come up, or you could soak them in between 2 moist paper towels overnight, or maybe over 2 nights before you sow them to give the little germ in there a head start on poking through and growing into a beautiful beet plant for you. Now, a fun fact about beet seeds, and when you direct seed these, you just have to take a moment and stare at your beautiful beets, because these seeds are incredible looking, and they're actually a compound seed. So there are multiple germs in one seed. In other words, you plant what looks like one seed, and you might get 2 or 3 beets from that one seed looking thing, but it's actually a compound seed, and you should not try to separate them. They come that way for a reason. If you try to separate them, then you are jeopardizing the vitality of those germs or little baby seeds getting ready to sprout. So that's a fun little fact for you. If you can find a variety that's monogerm, that would be great for your beets, because that's telling you that there's one germ in that seed looking thing. And then you can be more precise as you plant. It's just an option. So that's your beets. You want to cover them very lightly with soil. And once they sprout, especially if you have overseeded, so if you've seeded twice as many as you need, then you'll need to go in and thin those little beet babies, which basically means you pull out the extra sprouts that have come up so that you can reach that 4-inch spacing on your beets. So you go in and you thin them. You can eat those little microgreens that you pull out. It's totally an option for you. And then, you just let them rock and roll until they're ready to harvest. Now, your spinach and your chard, these two you can plant using a seed or a seedling. Spinach, I tend to go seed on spinach because I like to broadcast my spinach, or like sprinkle a bunch of seeds over an entire block of soil so that I can really maximize my space. Whereas Swiss chard, or chard in general, it needs a little bit more space. So it needs more like 12 to 18 inches between each plant. So I usually use seedlings for those, but you can certainly use seeds for both or seedlings for both. I find also with the spinach that I start from seed that I get a little bit longer of a harvest window. And whenever you're planting leafy greens, it's great to add to your well-draining soil some compost or high nitrogen plant food, or just an all-purpose plant food would be fine as well. So I'll put some links in the show notes for some suggestions, both for compost and for an all-purpose plant food. An all-purpose plant food is going to give you balanced nutrition across your 3 macronutrients. So your nitrogen, which is important for our leafy greens because it's supportive for the photosynthetic process. It also helps the plants grow their leafy green stems and leaves, which is what we're eating. But an all-purpose plant food is going to have balanced nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Potassium is a great multivitamin for your plants. You can think of it that way. And so it's good to just add some of that when you're getting started before you seed. And then if you're growing in smaller spaces, like a smaller pot or container, it can be super helpful and super beneficial for you to feed those leafy greens and your roots with that all-purpose plant food every 4 to 6 weeks. Now, when you're harvesting, your spinach and your chard are 2 crops that you can come back to the same plant over and over and over again to harvest. For chard and spinach, you can pick the leaves off as needed and new leaves will grow back. It's like magic. And this will happen throughout the growing season. So spinach and chard are great kind of bang for your bucks in small space food growing. Beets, on the other hand, they are wonderful and delicious and they don't take up a lot of space. But once you harvest a beet, you have totally pulled that plant and you're now going to eat the plant, and the plant is no longer going to grow for you. So your root vegetables, you get 1 harvest per plant from those. If you really want to maximize your harvest window of beets, then maybe you consider some succession planting. If you have a space that you want to dedicate to beets, maybe you sow 2 or 3 rows of beets one week, and then you wait until the next week and you sow 2 or 3 more rows of beets, and then you wait another week and you do 2 or 3 more rows of beets, and kind of staggering that seeding process, you'll be able to extend your harvest window of those things. So if that's appealing to you, if you really want a bumper crop of beets or any root vegetable, maybe you give that a try. And then once you harvest your beets, your chard, your spinach, Those can keep in the refrigerator for maybe like up to a week, but I wouldn't go any longer than a week. And I would try to just harvest, one of the beautiful things about growing food at home for ourselves is that we can harvest things when we need them. And that's really what I would encourage you to do with members of this plant family because they're cold hardy, like they're fine outside until you need them. You can certainly harvest like a bunch, no pun intended, but you could harvest a bunch of beets or a bunch of spinach or enough for a couple of meals, or you can just go out and harvest as you need it. That way it's super fresh and you don't have to worry about it taking up room in the fridge. You don't have to worry about it spoiling on you. Just going out and embracing that practice of when you're ready to eat it, you go out and you pick it and you eat it. But it will store, all three of these will store in the refrigerator for a couple of days, up to a week, just fine. With your beets, you want to make sure that you rinse off all the soil. I like to do this before I bring them in the house, but I like to rinse off all the soil and then pat them dry and store them in a plastic bag or in a produce bag. Spinach, a little trick for keeping your spinach nice and crisp in the refrigerator is to tuck a dry paper towel into the bag with the leaves. If the leaves are going in wet, then the paper towel can be dry. If the leaves are going in dry, then you can moisten the paper towel just a little bit to keep things nice and crisp and fresh for you. And you can do the same thing with the chard leaves too. Okay, so that wraps up our episode on the Chenopodiaceae plant family. I really hope that you join me in sowing some spinach or some chard or some beets this fall. These are delicious edible plants that we can do so much with. They're so versatile and they're so tasty. Super good for us. Very nutritious. So next week will be the last Meet the Plant Families episode. Period. We'll be wrapping up this whole series, believe it or not, next week. This has been a year-long series that I have done through the podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would encourage you to go back, find the other Meet the Plant Family episodes. I feel like there's at least 8 of them at this point, including this one. There's at least 8 of them, I feel. So it's been a really fun series to do, and we are wrapping it up next week, and we are going to be talking about the Rutaceae plant family. Anybody know the Rutaceae plant family? Any takers? Anybody know? It's citrus. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we're going to do a deep dive on all things citrus. And this is important because as we get closer to fall, if you have any citrus plants, there are some key maintenance, key care items and tasks that you need to be mindful of. And this is also great. It would be a great episode if you do not have any citrus plants at the moment, but you think at some point in your near future or not so near future, you might invest in some citrus plants. This episode will help you be even more in the know and clued in as to what these plants need to really thrive and be happy. So next week, we are going to talk about the Rutaceae plant family to close us out on this grand mini-series that we have done all year long. So be sure to tune in for that. And if you've listened to this podcast in the past, then you'll know at the end of every episode, I like to sign off with a little tidbit, a little morsel of information. It's usually unrelated to each episode, but this week it's like semi-related. And it's about seed packets. So, because I mentioned that you can seed all of these, and I would encourage you to seed all of these, and I would also encourage you to choose high quality seeds from a seed company that has a great reputation. I do have an episode or a blog post about different seed companies that I like to support, so I'll be sure to link that information in today's show notes for you. But when you get your seed packets, if you have chosen seeds from a company that is focused on providing products for home growers or not just farmers, then there should be a lot of really great information tucked in on the seed packet itself. So, for example, I have to kind of give you this content here at the end, I have a packet of high mowing organic seed. Love high mowing. I've used them almost exclusively all year long, and they have not disappointed. They never disappoint. They're so fantastic. But their seeds, their packets, first of all, always have a picture, an actual picture. It's not a drawing or a depiction. It's an actual picture of the crop and the variety, which is brilliant. And then on the front of the packet, it will tell you if that variety is an heirloom variety, if it's open pollinated. Open pollinated is important to know because that means that you can save the seeds from the plants that grow and you can sow them again and they will be true to the variety. Yeah, as opposed to a hybrid, which is a whole nother thing. This packet of seed also tells me the days to maturity. So this is I'm looking at Mardi Gras bush beans, super cute, tricolor bush beans, so great. And these take 55 days to mature, which means from the time the seed sprouts, which it tells you how long that takes on the back of the packet, so great. From the time that the seed sprouts to the time that you can do a first harvest is that window, that days to maturity window. And for this variety of beans, it's 55 days. So great to know. I'm recording this episode at the end of August, and there's still plenty of time to sow bush beans if you're interested before the frost. And then on the back of the packet, there's a quick description about the variety itself. There's the Latin name for the crop. And then there's planting tips, which are super helpful. And then along the side, it tells you like the seed planting depth, your spacing, your days to germination, if you need to thin, what your spacing is after you thin, row spacing, and then an estimated plant height. There's so much information on the back of these seed packets. You really should read them. They're so informative. This is what I find to be the sign of quality seed products. First is they list the year that the seeds were packed for. If you don't see the year that the seeds were packed for listed on the packet of seeds itself, that is usually a no-brainer telling you that that packet of seed is not a high quality seed. All your seed packets should have at least the year that they are intended for. And then what I also love about high mowing is that there's a batch number and a lot number. So that just helps with quality tracking. If you have an issue, hold on to your seed packets, and it's just a good quality control thing. So there you go. That's a quick little rundown of what all you might be able to learn just from reading a seed packet. So now you know, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. I hope that your summer crops that you have growing, if they're still growing for you, that they're super productive and that you are just filling up those harvest baskets and getting ready for fall. Be sure to check the show notes. I always have lots of information tucked in for you there. And I will see you again next week for the last final episode of the Meet the Plant Families mini-series.
Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Growing Space podcast. I hope that you learned something new and that you were able to take this new information home with you and implement into your growing journey and into your growing space. As always, I am here to support you and your food growing journey. If you'd like to learn more about the different services and resources and membership programs that I run through the Patio Farmer, please check out my website, thepatiofarmer.com. You can also follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and oh my gosh, most recently, TikTok. Wow. I know. Here I am. Patio Farmer is on TikTok. It's very exciting. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like or a rating or a review if you want. Maybe share a little comment about your favorite part of the episode. Share it with a friend. The more interactions I get with my little podcast online, the more I'm able to help people just like you in their food growing journeys. As always, thanks for being here, and I will see you again next week.